Well, every Thursday we have with us from Boulder, Colorado, and he's back in Boulder now, one of our most popular guests, Professor E. Christian Kopff, University of Colorado.
It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA. Here's Kevin Torres.
If today, in the United States, but anywhere in the world really, Christians, who cares, right? Right now, Christians, and most of you listening to me now are Christians. Most Christians don't really seem to care that their fellow Christians are being slaughtered. Some people do, but many don't. Chris Kopff is with us today, and there is a slaughter, not a persecution, a slaughter going on of Christians in Iraq, Kurdistan, the new caliphate that these yahoos have declared. Chris, why don't Christians rally to other Christians? They haven't since the 17th century, the last time 16-something or other, they all got together and defeated the Muslims at Vienna. But it doesn't happen. They don't care.
No, it's amazing. And by the way, a lot of what happened even in the 17th century with the brave Polish army standing up for us when a lot of other people were not.
King Sobieski, right.
Absolutely. I mean, it wasn't all Christians either. The English had their own problems that were just completely splitting the country apart. Germany was split, of course, on and on and on. But, yeah, you're asking a very great question. Christianity is, in some parts of the world, Christians are the most successful, protected, and peaceful people. In some parts of the world, Christians are also the most persecuted, most attacked, and most murdered religious group in the world in other parts. And the question is why the people who live in the wealthy and peaceful parts, and do, in the case of the United States, command an incredible army and other kinds of resources like drones and other things that can protect people without risking American lives, are doing nothing, or little anyhow, to protect their fellow Christians in the Near East who are being driven out of their ancestral homelands where they've lived for 2,000 years, after all, and are being murdered massively and killed. And this is the proclaimed object of our new Islamic State of Syria and Iraq and Syria,
ISIS,
or Iraq
ISIS.
of the Levant, as it's called. These people are imposing Sharia law. They're out to kill people who are opposed to them. Many are now fleeing. Many Christians are now fleeing to the Kurds to hide there, and there are Kurdish Christians. Syria, of course, that's part of what's going on there, is the opponents of the dictator Assad are anti-Christian and blame him, among other things, for protecting Christians and other minorities. So we've got the Near East, a situation where a religious body that has been an important part of the culture of the ancient Near East for 2,000 years is being systematically eliminated from that part of the world.
I forgot about Africa. Not all parts of Africa, but this Boko Haram group.
Yes, well, Africa is quite a split because there are many Christians in Africa, and Christianity is the fastest-growing religion in Africa. But the Muslims in Africa are absolutely out to destroy Christianity, to stop it, and to stop it not by persuading people, not by winning hearts and minds, but by killing Christians.
Well, we'll get to President Obama, the former president of the United States, as some people are calling him, since he seems to have retired to the golf course. But anyway, we'll get to that.
Very hard giving those talks at fundraisers.
Oh, yeah. Well, it wears a guy out.
Reminded us what hard work it is to prepare those talks.
Oh, yeah. We'll get to that later. But let's talk a little bit about the Kurds. Most Americans understandably have no idea who the Kurds are. Let's talk about the Kurds. Who are the Kurds, and why are the Christians fleeing to the Kurds who are now on the run from ISIS?
Well, part of the reason why Americans can't find them on the map is that they don't really have their own country.
Well, that's true. Yeah, they don't.
They are about, and I'm trying to figure, but 30 million or so people. They call the area they live Kurdistan, but the legal names of the countries crosses over the boundaries of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And in Iraq, they've had partial autonomy since 1990 or 1991. But they are a place that have, as a minority, they do have their own language. It's Indo-European, but as a minority, they have also suffered from the various problems of the contemporary Near East, and they've stood up to these people in Iraq and Iran. And the result is that Christians who are fleeing persecution on their own have gone to the parts of Syria, Iraq, and Iran where the Kurds live to at least get some kind of protection. And there are also Christian Kurds.
Well, the Kurds have been persecuted too, as you point out. In 1919, at the Paris Peace Conference, by the way, all those guys should rise from the dead and apologize for all the messes they made in the world. Wilson, Orlando, Clemenceau, and George. What a mess they made of everything. Anyhow, the Kurds went to the peace conference, and like so many others, they wanted their own country. They were told to buzz off. Meanwhile, they made countries that weren't countries. They put together the Serbs and the Bosnians who hated each other, and we saw what happened there eventually. But anyhow, the Kurds were denied their country under Wilson's, we won't talk about that. Anyhow.
Yeah, among all his faults, that's one of them.
What kind of Muslims?
19, I think.
What kind of Muslim? They're Muslims mostly, aren't they, the Kurds?
Yes, they are massive majority Muslim, and they're Sunni Muslims. A small number of Shias, but there's a small number of different groups throughout. And there actually are even a few Zoroastrians there, and of course there are a small number of Jews, small number of Christians, mainly recent converts, as they see that if they're going to be persecuted by their fellow Muslims for being Kurdish, they might as well, join So they're part of the mix of different Muslim groups, and they are mainly Sunni. It's well known they have their own customs, their own way of life. Other Muslims don't trust them. In Iraq, they say if you compare them to an unbeliever, a Kurd is still a Muslim. But that's about the most they'll give them. They're not in favor of Sharia law. They are very interested in the great mystical traditions of Sufi. It's a very interesting group of people per se, but they're caught in this situation in the current Near East, where if you're not part of the group that's in power, you are very likely to be persecuted. And now that we've got the ISIS state out there, even killed. They claim comes from Sharia law, and they're just enforcing the law.
Yeah.
So they're not the slightest bit ashamed, nor do they hide what they're doing, chopping off of hands, killing people who they feel are selling out or apostate. This is what they feel they're obliged to do by Sharia law. So we're sitting there going, oh my gosh, these awful people are atrocities. Hey, it's not one of these things where a small group has gone wild or somebody has lost control of his men. This is the policy of the ISIS government.
And if you're a true believer in relativism, you should say, hooray for them.
Yes, they have their own way of life.
That's right.
It's part of the diversity of the modern Near East.
Yeah.
If only we had that diversity.
Yeah, relativism. I've always said if you really want to push it to the limit, go into the bank, give them a $20 bill and ask for a change for a $50. See what happens to you. You can sincerely believe anything you want. You won't get that change back. We'll take a break.
Relativism in math would be a wonderful thing if we were all allowed to have our own opinion, right?
Yeah. We'll be back in just a moment, and we're going to ask the question of Chris. I'll stay out of it. Has Barack Obama retired from the presidency? Well, Chris, I posed the question just before the break. A lot of people, by the way, are asking, a lot of people in Washington are asking Obama, please save the Kurds. You haven't done a thing for anybody else except the Libyans, and you made that worse. But save the Kurds. Will you please save the Kurds? He won't. Has he retired from the presidency, do you think, mentally?
I think he has basically, I compared him earlier to certain small number, of course, I must insist, some tenure-track professors who basically, don't show up for their office hours, show up for class, but that's it. Publish a book review every couple of years, and basically have retired. They've written themselves a job description, which doesn't involve any or very much work.
These are tenured professors you're talking.
People who've done that. They've written themselves, they can't easily be fired. They're close enough to retirement, so it would take as long to fire them as for them to retire. And they simply stop working. They show up in their classes, and But I even knew a guy here this was now some time ago. He isn't here anymore. Who would take Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, but only show up on Monday and Wednesday. And when people complained, the chair of his department said, "Well, this is academic freedom."
Oh yes, I love
Talk
that.
about relativism. He redefined the week.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, has Barack just mentally retired from the presidency?
Yes, he's never had to work hard in his life. He doesn't like working hard. Things aren't going well. It's bound to happen. The chickens have come home to roost on many of his policies. And so he's just decided he's not going to pay attention anymore. He has, by the way, he works very hard raising money. He does many of these fundraisers. But what he likes to do is give speeches.
Yeah.
And he's still, if you consider that work, and I mentioned before, Mrs. Clinton was irate that people complain that Goldman Sachs give her $200,000 to go and give them an hour-long talk and answer a few questions. And so I have to work and prepare and all the rest of these things. I mean, this is something that all college professors do every day. And Goldman Sachs is not offering us $200,000 a pop. So, and then this is what Obama does. He raises money. He's a terrific fundraiser. He's managed to, how these Democrats, I think some Democrats are now catching on that they're suckers to be, supporting this guy because he's just rousing up there. They could impeach me. Who would notice if you were impeached?
Joe Biden and his wife might. They'd have to move.
Making these funny jokes. Joe has a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
We'd have Mr. Kerry would still be flying around the world, keeping busy. The Botox has given him, this intense look on his face, and so he looks really great when things are bad because he always looks like he's very concerned about things. And I mean, we'd have basically the same situation. As we know, Valerie Jarrett, as you mentioned, basically is running the White House. She's been running it for quite a few years. She's very hard-nosed, but she's very ideological, and that's the problem in politics. You need to negotiate a little bit and have trade-offs. And at this stage, the feeling that there's a breakdown of the rule of law, there is an international chaos in so many regions, we can't keep track of them. As you mentioned, most Americans don't know where Kurdistan is, if there is not legally such a place, but there is actually such a place. Most Americans don't know where the Ukraine is, and we've lost track of what's going on there. We've seen the massacre of Christians in the Near East and their disappearance. There'll be an occasional reference to it in some conservative places, and a few people writing on it. The Pope will mention it occasionally, but as a whole, it's not an event in people's minds. People disappearing and local news things have much bigger coverage than do these major changes in the world that's going on all around us. And the president doesn't seem to even notice. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't mention it. He's back to his "I didn't know about this till I read about it in the Washington Post" routine.
And besides, it was Bush's fault anyway.
And it was Bush's fault.
Well, a lot of things were Bush's fault. There's no question. But
he started the Near Eastern stuff, and there's no question that the invasion of Iraq is the first cause of the driving of Christians out.
That's right.
It really provoked a serious problem because Saddam Hussein was protecting Christians and other minorities.
Listen, people argue with me about this, but I think if you could talk to the average Iraqi and say, look, I know Saddam wasn't a nice guy, but as one Iraqi told me, if you kept your mouth shut and went to work, did your job, they didn't bother you. It's only when you spoke out. Who would you rather have back, a guy that kept the country safe or a guy that's, well, there's nobody there now anymore. It doesn't exist anymore, really.
Chaos. No, the libertarians used to say, look, it's true you had no freedom of speech. On the other hand, you could buy a drink, you could go out for dinner. Yeah. There are all kinds of things. For most of the lives most of us want to live, you could live that kind of life in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. And nowadays, you can't. Even if you just want to be an ordinary guy and just hang around, you can't. They're imposing Sharia law over half the country. The other half is in chaos. At least the Kurdish section has some kind of law and order, which is why so many people are fleeing there, which, by the way, they can't handle. I mean, they're being overwhelmed by it.
No, and we're not going to help them either. By golly, we're not going to help them, right?
No, because, it must be said, to some extent, Barack Obama knows his own limitations, and he's made a mess of every situation he's tried to help. Libya is in complete chaos now. And again, you could say the same thing about Gaddafi. He was a dictator. There was not freedom of speech, but you used to be able to go and live your life.
Yeah, you could go down to the shopping mall and not worry about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Most people, that's what we want in our lives. I understand the importance of freedom of speech, but first you have to have a civil order and the ability to live your life, make a living,
support your family,
all
right?
This ordinary stuff, and you could do that under Gaddafi. You could do that under Saddam Hussein, and now in Libya and Iraq, you can't do that anymore.
All right, we're down.
It made things so much worse, and the only reason why Egypt isn't so bad is the military took over again.
It would have been, it would have been if they'd had
the same chaos there, except the army there stayed in control and imposed military rule. So they have what is effectively a dictatorship, and most Egyptians are happy for it.
Yeah. Now, we're down to a few minutes, Chris, and we started something last week about people who have had a profound influence on our time. And the last name you mentioned, but we didn't have time to discuss it, Sigmund Freud. Go ahead. Tell me about Sigmund.
Well, Sigmund Freud, what the change he made, and by the way, within psychology, he's not influential. Within these technical areas, people don't. But he changed the dynamic on family and community as opposed to the individual. He's the one who really said, look, individuals are unique. They have these deep psychological issues. The reason for moral restraint and all the rest, it has nothing to do with a rational ability to control things, but simply the rational ability to have morality and high standards, but simply to control. The emphasis on sex, which obviously sex is an important part of the world. That's been an important part of history. But again, everything comes down now to sex and gender. And you say the big changes we've seen is, on the one hand, Marx says it's economics, not politics, and Freud says it's sex and gender, not community, nationality, religious group. Yeah. And this is, both men have been incredibly influential in people turning away from attitudes that were very productive and creative, even though restraining, and replacing them with attitudes that are destructive.
Now, Freud, here's the way I look at Freud, and I'm hardly an expert on this, but he took his own little problems, if you will, and they were little, in the general scheme of things, and then he made them everybody's problems. Come on, give me a break, will you? He had trouble with sex, so he said everybody must. Well, no, wait a minute, hold it. You're going from the particular to the general, always a bad thing to do, but our time is gone. We'll pick this up next week. Dr. E. Christian Kopff, University of Colorado, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you.